As the sun rose over the banks of the Ganges River, King Dhritarashtra stood on the river bank, his eyes fixed on the spot where his brother Bhishma's manes were said to reside. He poured libations of water into the river, a ritual meant to appease the spirits of the dead. But as he did so, his mind was elsewhere, consumed by grief and regret. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava prince, stood nearby, his eyes brimming with tears. His senses were reeling from the weight of their recent losses, and the burden of leadership weighed heavily on him. As he gazed out at the river, his legs gave way beneath him, and he fell to the ground like an elephant struck by a hunter's arrow. Krishna, ever vigilant and wise, rushed to Yudhishthira's side, urging him to lift him up. This must not be so, Krishna said firmly, as if speaking to himself rather than others. The Pandavas gathered around their fallen leader, overwhelmed by grief and concern for his well-being. As they tended to Yudhishthira, Dhritarashtra approached them, his own eyes red-rimmed from sorrow. He had lost 100 sons in the war, and now he saw his nephew struggling with the weight of his duties. Rise up, O Teja, among the Kuras, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Attend to your duties. My son, you have conquered this earth according to the usage of Kshatriyas. Now enjoy it with your brothers and friends. But Dhritarashtra's words were laced with regret. He knew that if only he had listened to the wise counsel of his brother Vidura, their family might not be facing such devastation. Vidura had warned him about the dangers of Duryodhana's influence, but Dhritarashtra had turned a deaf ear to his advices. He spoke. Dhritarashtra's eyes fell upon his wife Gandhari and himself, both of them overcome with grief. He knew that they should be mourning, not Yudhishthira, who had emerged victorious in the war. It is I who should mourn, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was foolish to follow Duryodhana's lead. If only I had listened to Vidura's words of wisdom. Vidura himself had spoken truthfully. Their family would meet with annihilation due to the transgressions of Duryodhana and his cohorts. Now, as Dhritarashtra gazed upon the ruins of their once great kingdom, he knew that he had failed in his duty to protect his sons. As the day wore on, Yudhishthira slowly regained his strength, but the weight of his responsibilities remained heavy on him. His father's words still echoed. The wise king Dhritarashtra had just finished speaking to his son. Yudhishthira, who was overcome with sorrow, the young prince's eyes were downcast and his voice trembled as he spoke of the pain that gnawed at his heart. His father's words had been gentle and reassuring, but they seemed to have little effect on the depth of Yudhishthira's grief. Just then Krishna, the wise and compassionate leader, approached Yudhishthira. He placed a hand on the young prince's shoulder and spoke in a calm, soothing voice. Yudhishthira, my dear friend, he said, do not let your sorrow consume you. Remember that it is not right to grieve excessively for those who have passed away. Instead, celebrate their lives by performing many sacrifices, offering gifts to the priests, and sharing food and drink with your guests. Krishna's words were like a balm to Yudhishthira's soul. He looked up at Krishna, his eyes shining with gratitude. You are right, Krishna, he said. I have been foolish to let my grief weigh me down. But despite Krishna's words of comfort, Yudhishthira's mind was still troubled. Krishna sensed the depth of Yudhishthira's sorrow and spoke again. My dear prince, you are a Kshatriya, a warrior king. Your duty is to rule with strength and courage, not to be overwhelmed by grief. You have heard the teachings of Bhishma, Krishna, Dwapena, Narada, and Vidura. Remember that a king who performs his duties properly should not let sorrow consume him. Yudhishthira listened intently to Krishna's words, but he still felt a heavy burden on his heart. He looked at Krishna with pleading eyes and said, O Govinda, I know your love for me is true. If you permit me to go into the forest and live as an ascetic, I will be able to find peace. I have committed a great sin by killing my grandfather in Karna, who never fled from battle. Krishna's expression was compassionate, but he knew that Yudhishthira's mind was still clouded by his grief. So he paused, and it was then that the wise sage Visa spoke up. My child, he said gently, your mind is not yet calm, and therefore you are again troubled by childish sentiments. Visa's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing Yudhishthira's soul. Visa continued to speak, his voice filled with wisdom and compassion. You know the duties of a Kshatriya who lives by warfare. A king who has performed his proper part should not let sorrow consume him. You have listened faithfully to the teachings of. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura, casting a warm, orange glow over the bustling streets. Vesa, the revered sage, and Guru of the Pandavas sat in quiet contemplation with Yudhishthira, the eldest son of king, and knew the air was thick with the weight of recent events. As the kingdom struggled to come to terms with the devastating war that had ravaged their lands, Visa's eyes locked onto Yudhishthira's, his gaze piercing. "And wise, O Yudhishthira," he said, his voice low and soothing, "your wisdom is not yet complete. You believe yourself responsible for the sins of the past. But do you truly understand the nature of fate? It is God who guides us, who nudges us towards good or ill. Where then is the room for repentance?" Yudhishthira's face fell, his eyes cast downward in shame. "I have sinned," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Vesa nodded sympathetically. "Then listen well, Bharata, to the way of purification. Through penance, sacrifice, and charity one can wash away even the darkest of stains. The gods themselves perform sacrifices to secure their merit, and it is through these acts that they have become so powerful." Isa's words hung in the air like a promise. But Yudhishthira's doubts lingered. "But how can I, who have destroyed my own kingdom, possibly celebrate such rites?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Vesa's expression turned thoughtful, and he stroked his bird as if collecting his thoughts. "Your treasury is empty, your people suffer." Yudhishthira continued, his words spilling out in a torrent of grief. "How can I possibly gather the resources for such a grand sacrifice? And what of those who have been wounded, who still bear the scars of our war?" Vesa listened attentively, his eyes never leaving Yudhishthira's face. When the young king finally fell silent, Vesa nodded thoughtfully. "I see your concerns, O Yudhishthira," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "But fear not, for I have a plan to set things right." He leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "In the Himalayas there lies a treasure trove of gold left behind by the great Brahmana, Meru. It is a legacy from his magnificent sacrifice, one that will replenish your treasury and restore your kingdom's honor." Yudhishthira's eyes widened in amazement as Vesa began to tell the tale of Meru, a king from a bygone era, who had once ruled with wisdom and justice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a warm twilight glow, in the presence of Yudhishthira, the righteous one, Vesa began to recount the tale of the illustrious King Meru. "O child," Vesa said, "in the Creta-age man who was the lord of the earth, wielding his scepter with wisdom and justice, his son present I succeeded him, followed by his grandson King Ikshwatu, who was renowned for his piety and virtue. King Ikshwatu had 100 sons, each endowed with exceptional qualities, and he made them all monarchs in their own right. Among them Vinsa stood out as the greatest bowman of his time, and his son Vivinsa surpassed him in every aspect. Vivinsa's 5 and 10 sons were powerful archers, revered by the Brahmanas for their truthfulness, gentleness, and noble character. However, the eldest brother Kananitra proved to be a tyrant, oppressing all his siblings and ruling with an iron fist. But the people grew tired of his cruelty, and eventually they deposed him in favor of his son Suvarka. This young king was devoted to the Brahmanas, spoke the truth, practiced purity, and restrained his senses and thoughts. The subjects rejoiced at his ascension, for he brought peace and prosperity to the kingdom. Despite his virtuous deeds, King Suvarka's treasury dwindled, and the feudatory princes began to trouble him. His power waned, but his righteousness remained unshaken. In a moment of desperation, he blew into his hand, and from it emerged a supply of forces, which he used to vanquish all the kings living along his borders. From this remarkable feat, King Suvarka earned the title Karan among the Treta-age. His son, the first Karandama, was born, equaling Indra himself in strength and invincibility. He ruled over a vast empire with all the kings under his control due to his wealth and prowess. His grandson, King Avachit, became like Indra himself in heroism, performing countless sacrifices and delighting in virtue. King Avachit's son Maruta was a righteous monarch of great renown, possessing the might of 10,000 elephants. He was said to be Vishnu's second self, embodying all the virtues of his ancestors. Desiring to celebrate a grand sacrifice, King Maruta traveled to Mount Meru on the northern side of Himavat, where he caused thousands of golden vessels to be forged in a vast golden hill. He performed the sacred rites, surrounded by goldsmiths who crafted basins, vessels, and pans without number. The sacrificial ground was nearby, and King Maruta, accompanied by other princes, performed the majestic sacrifice, honoring the traditions of his illustrious lineage. In the realm of the gods, Indra, the mighty king of the Devas, was displeased with Maruta, a powerful monarch among men. The reason for his discontent was Avadsheta's son, who had refused to accept Brihaspati as his spiritual preceptor. Indra, unable to bear the prince's insolent pride, threatened to smite him with his thunderbolt. Dhritarashtra, a Gandharva and messenger of Indra, arrived at Maruta's court, bearing a message from the king of the gods. He delivered the words of Indra: "Accept Brihaspati as your officiating priest for the sacrifice, or face the consequences of my wrath." Maruta, however, refused to comply with Indra's demand, and instead offered Samvarta, his own priest, to perform the ritual. Dhritarashtra, undeterred by Maruta's defiance, warned him that Indra's thunderbolt was imminent. The sound of the gods' mighty roar echoed through the heavens, striking fear into the hearts of all who heard it. Maruta, trembling with anxiety, sought shelter from Samvarta. His trusted priest Samvarta, calm and composed, reassured Maruta that he had nothing to fear from Indra. With his magical incantations, he would dispel the thunderbolt's terror and protect the king from harm. As the storm raged on outside, Samvarta began to chant his sacred hymns, weaving a spell of protection around Maruta. Just as the priest finished his incantation, Indra himself appeared, his chariot drawn by majestic steeds, accompanied by the other gods. The lord of the Devas descended from his vehicle and approached the sacrificial altar, where Maruta offered him some libations. With a warm smile, Indra accepted the oblations, his heart filled with gratitude for the hospitality shown to him. The ceremony reached its climax as Samvarta, radiant like the blazing fire, ascended the altar and offered clarified butter to the sacred flames. The gods themselves collected the food, and Sakra, the lord of the gods, became an assistant at the sacrifice. As the ritual concluded, Indra drank the sum. Juice, followed by the assembly of other gods. With their thirst quenched, the Devas returned home well pleased and delighted. Maruta, overjoyed by the success of his sacrifice, distributed immense wealth to the Brahmanas, who looked glorious as they received their gifts. The monarch's heart was filled with happiness, knowing that his ancestors and the gods themselves had been gratified by his generosity. As the sun set on this grand occasion, Indra, pleased with Maruta's devotion, bestowed a final blessing upon him. "O prince, your sacrifice has been perfected, and your life blessed with good results. May you continue to prosper under the protection." In the ancient land of Bharata, King Maruta, a wise and just ruler, had been preparing for a grand sacrifice. He sought out Brihaspati, the renowned priest of the gods, to officiate at the ritual. However, Brihaspati declined, citing his appointment as priest by Indra. The king of the gods, Maruta, was taken aback by this rejection and felt ashamed. As he returned home lost in thought, he encountered Narada, a wise sage who had witnessed the incident. Narada asked Maruta about his distress, and upon hearing the story offered words of comfort and guidance. Narada told Maruta that Brihaspati's son Samvarta was wandering the earth as a naked ascetic, performing miracles for all to see. He suggested that Maruta seek out Samvarta, who might be willing to perform his sacrifice. Narada provided Maruta with instructions on how to find Samvarta. He should place a dead body near the gate of Varanasi and follow the person who turned away from it. Maruta set off towards Varanasi, determined to find Samvarta and seek his help. As he reached the city, he placed a corpse at the gate, just as Narada had instructed. By chance, a Brahmana entered the city at the same time, and upon seeing the corpse turned away in disgust. Maruta followed the Brahmana, who was none other than Samvarta. They walked. Samvarta led Maruta on a wild goose chase, covering him with mud, ashes, fledged him, and spittle. Despite his ordeal, Maruta persisted, following Samvarta with hands clasped together in supplication. Eventually exhausted and parched, they reached the shade of a sacred fig tree, where Samvarta finally desisted from his antics. In this tranquil setting, Samvarta sat down to rest, and Maruta, still clinging to his hopes, approached him with reverence. The story of King Maruta's quest for a priest and his encounter with the enigmatic Samvarta serves as a testament to the power of perseverance and devotion in the pursuit of spiritual growth. In the scorching desert of ancient India, a peculiar encounter took place between two men, Maruta, the king, and Samvarta, a Brahmana priest. Their meeting was not by chance, but rather orchestrated by the celestial saint Narada, who had revealed to Maruta that Samvarta was his family's long-lost kindness. They sat beneath the shade of a majestic tree. Maruta spoke with trepidation. "I have been told by Narada, wandering on his way, that thou art the son of our family priest, and this has inclined my mind towards The Samvarta's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he listened intently to Narada's words. He knew that Narada was a wise sage who had seen beyond the veil of time. Samvarta's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked, "Thou hast told this to me truly? If so, then tell me, where is Narada living at present?" Narada's face lit up with a mixture of sadness and reverence as he replied, "That Prince of Celestial Saints having given me this information about thee and commended me to thy care, has entered into the fire." The air was heavy with an unspoken understanding that Narada had transcended the mortal realm. As Narada's words faded away, Samvarta's demeanor changed. He became agitated like a storm brewing on the horizon. "I am afflicted with a cerebral disorder," he declared, his voice rising in a crescendo of frustration. "Why art thou bent upon having this sacrifice performed by a priest of such a singular disposition?" Narada stood firm, undeterred by Samvarta's outburst. The Brahmana continued to scold Narada, but the king remained steadfast. He explained that he had already sought the aid of Vrihaspati and Indra, only to be rebuffed. "I have been repulsed by Vrihaspati for no fault of mine," Narada said, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. Samvarta's stormy demeanor began to dissipate, replaced by an air of intrigues. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. Samvarta revealed his true intentions. "I can certainly, O king, accomplish all that thou desirest," he said, his eyes glinting with a fierce determination. But there was a warning attached to this promise. If Narada were to betray him, he would unleash a wrath upon the kingdom that would reduce it to ashes. Narada's response was immediate and heartfelt. "If ever I forsake thee, may I never attain the blessed regions as long as the mountains shall exist," he vowed, his voice trembling with sincerity. The air was heavy with the weight of this promise, a bond forged between two men from different worlds, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky. In the majestic Himalayas there existed a peak known as Manjaban, where the revered Lord Mahadeva dwelled in austere devotion. His consort Yuma stood by his side, and together they resided amidst giant forest trees, caves, and rugged peaks. The mighty god's trident shone brightly, surrounded by an array of wild goblin spirits and celestial beings, as the Rudras sat highest visited as Vasus, Varuna, and Kavara with his attendants, as well as the Yakshas, Gandharvas, Apsaras, and sun gods. Hey, homage to Mahadeva's greatness! The mountain itself radiated an otherworldly splendor. The air was alive with the vibrant energy of the divine presence. Of peak's resplendent beauty defied mortal comprehension, as no creature could discern its shape or configuration. The extreme temperatures of heat and cold were absent, and neither did the sun shine, nor the winds blow. It was a realm where age, hunger, thirst, death, and fear held no sway. As one approached the mountain, they would find mines of gold, shining like rays of sunlight. The attendants of Kavara guarded these treasures with devotion, protecting them from intruders with their uplifted arms. For those who sought to appease Mahadeva, this was a sacred destination where they could crave his protection and acquire the coveted gold. Samvarta, a wise sage, had spoken thus about Manjaban to King Narada: "Hie thee thither, O prince, and bow unto that high-souled Mahadeva of great energy, thus making thee submission. Thou shalt acquire that gold." The king, eager to perform a grand sacrifice, followed Samvarta's counsel. Artisans crafted vessels of gold for the ritual, while Vrihaspati, the lord of the gods' advisor, grew increasingly distressed upon learning of Narada's prosperity. His rival Samvarta had gained favor with the king, and Vrihaspati's heart became heavy with sorrow. The lord of the gods himself came to console his advisor, accompanied by the immortals. As they arrived at Vrihaspati's residence, the lord addressed him with gentle words: "My dear Vrihaspati, do not be troubled by Samvarta's success, for in the grand tapestry of the universe there is room for all to flourish." In the realm of the gods, Indra, the mighty lord of the celestials, sought to console his trusted advisor Vrihaspati, who appeared troubled and pale. Indra asked Vrihaspati about his well-being, inquiring if he slept peacefully, if his servants were content, and if he sought the welfare of the gods. Vrihaspati replied that he did indeed sleep soundly, and his servants were to his liking. However, he revealed a deep concern. Narada, a great king, was planning a grand sacrifice, and Vrihaspati feared that Samvarta, another priest, would officiate at the ceremony. Vrihaspati's anxiety stemmed from the fact that Samvarta's success would bring him prosperity, which in turn would cause Vrihaspati pain. Indra, understanding his advisor's distress, decided to intervene. He summoned Agni the fire god and instructed him to present Vryaspati to Maruta. As the chosen priest for the sacrifice, Indra assured Vryaspati that by accepting this role he would not only bring glory to himself, but also ensure Maruta's immortality had died with his blazing ear. Set off towards Maruta's kingdom, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake like a mighty wind at the end of winter. As he arrived at the royal court, Maruta welcomed Agni warmly and offered him refreshments. The fire god accepted these offerings, but revealed that Indra had sent him to present Vryaspati as the priest for the upcoming sacrifice. Maruta, however, refused to accept Vryaspati's role, insisting that Samvarta would officiate at his ceremony. Instead, Agni returned to Indra with this news, and the Lord of the Celestials was displeased. He instructed Agni to return to Maruta and convey a stern message. If he did not comply with Indra's wishes, he would face the consequences. Agni, fearing Samvarta's wrath, hesitated to return to Maruta's court. The fire god recounted his encounter with Samvarta, who had threatened to burn him with his fire's evil eyes if he presented Vryaspati again. Indra reassured Agni that even he, the mighty fire god, could not harm the Lord of the Celestials. Indra then reminded Agni of a past incident where he had been defeated by the Aswamedha, who was created by Chayavana, a powerful sage. The Lord of the Celestials recalled how he had been filled with fear and had sought the protection of the great sage. Indra's words were meant to reassure Agni that even he, the invincible Indra, could be humbled. Agni, understanding his master's intentions, returned to Maruta's court. Once more he conveyed Indra. The scene unfolded as Vesa finished his speech to King Dhritarashtra. The king's eyes were downcast, his mind heavy with grief, like a sun eclipsed by darkness or a fire smothered by smoke. His armor, once polished and shining, now seemed dull and tarnished. Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, approached him with compassion in his heart. He knew that the king was struggling to come to terms with the loss of his family members and kinsmen in the great war. Krishna began to speak softly his words, a gentle breeze on a summer day. Your Majesty, he said, all crookedness of heart leads to destruction, while all rectitude leads to spiritual excellence. If this is the ultimate aim of true wisdom, then what can mental distraction do to one who understands? This Krishna's eyes locked onto the king's, his gaze piercing and kind. The king listened intently as Krishna continued to speak. Your karma has not yet been fulfilled, he said gently, nor have your enemies been vanquished, for you still harbor inner demons that threaten to consume you. Vasudeva's words hung in the air like a challenge, a reminder of the battle still to be fought within. Krishna then began to tell an ancient tale, one that had been passed down through generations. In days of yore, he said, the earth was shrouded by Vritra, a monster who stole away its essence and left it reeking with full udders. The king's eyes widened as Krishna spoke on, his voice weaving a spell of wonder. Indra, the god of 100 sacrifices, was enraged by this affront to the natural order. He hurled his thunderbolt at Vritra, but the monster merely absorbed its power and continued to wreak havoc. Indra struck again and again, each time Vritra adapting and evolving, until finally the god's wrath was spent. Krishna paused, his chest heaving with emotion, as he told of how Vasista comforted Indra in his darkest hour. The king listened, entranced by the tale, as Krishna spoke on about how the mighty Indra ultimately slew Vritra within his own body using an invisible thunderbolt. The story was a reminder that even in the midst of chaos and destruction, there is always hope for redemption and victory over one's inner demons. Vasudeva's words hung in the air like a benediction, as if to say, you too, O king, can overcome your own Vritra, that which threatens to consume you from within.
In the grand halls of Hastinapura, King Dhritarashtra sat upon his throne, surrounded by the wise men of his court. Vasudeva, a sage renowned for his profound understanding of the human condition, stood before him. The king's son, Duryodhana, had been struggling with inner turmoil, and Vasudeva sought to guide him towards spiritual enlightenment. Vasudeva began to explain the dual nature of suffering, which arises from the interplay between the physical body and the mind. He described how the three essential humors, flame, bile, and wind, must be balanced within the body for one to experience good health. Similarly, the attributes of sattva, rajas, and Temas which reside in the soul must also be in harmony for mental well-being. As Vasudeva spoke his words, the tapestry of understanding before the king's son, he revealed how happiness and sorrow are intertwined like the threads of a rich fabric. Some people cling to memories of past joy, while others dwell on the pain they have known. But Duryodhana, unlike many, did not seem to be haunted by his own sorrows or nostalgic for his happier times. Vasudeva's eyes seemed to bore into the king's son as he continued, "You do not recall the painful sight of Krisha standing in the assembly hall, her body exposed and vulnerable. Nor do you brood on your departure from the city, your exile, or the troubles you faced with Jadajra, Chitrasna, and the Saindavas." The sage's words were a gentle reminder that Duryodhana had already confronted many challenges in his life. A wise man paused, then spoke of the impending battle that lay ahead. Not one fought with swords or arrows, but a struggle against the mind itself. In this war, Vasudeva declared, there will be no need for missiles, nor friends, nor attendants. You must face your inner demons alone and single-handed. He cautioned Duryodhana of the consequences should he fail to find himself in a wretched state, lost and without direction. Vasudeva's words hung in the air, like a promise, a challenge to be accepted or rejected. The king's son listened intently, his heart weighing the weight of his own desires and the wisdom offered by the sage. As the wise man finished speaking, the room seemed to grow quieter, as if the very fate of Duryodhana hung in the balance. The king himself intervened, his voice deep and authoritative. "O chief of Bharata's race," he said, "now is the time for you to prepare to carry this struggle within yourself by the merit of your own karma. You must reach the other side, overcome the mysterious and unintelligible mind." The court fell silent once more, as if awaiting Duryodhana. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura as Vasudeva, a wise and venerable sage, sat in contemplative silence. Before him stood his dear friend Yudhishthira, son of Pritha, who sought guidance on the path to salvation. So Vasudeva began is not merely about renouncing worldly possessions. My prince, true liberation lies in transcending the desires that bind us to our flesh and blood. The external world may be forsaken, but if we are consumed by our own passions and weaknesses, then what is the difference between ourselves and our enemies? As Vasudeva spoke, his eyes seemed to gaze into the very soul of Yudhishthira. "Consider this, my son," he continued, "the word mrityu, death itself, has only two letters, men, but the eternal spirit, Brahman, is represented by three letters. Thus, the distinction between these two lies not in their length, but in our perception of them. When we cling to worldly objects as if they were ours alone, that is mrityu. But when we transcend such attachments, we become one with the eternal spirit." Vasudeva paused, his gaze drifting into the distance as he pondered the mysteries of existence in every soul. A war rages between Brahman and mrityu. The outcome depends on our choices, not on external circumstances. If we are convinced that no creature is ever destroyed, then how can we be guilty of harming another by piercing its body? What matters it if we rule over the entire earth with all its wonders? And Rishis Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind grappling with the complexities of Vasudeva's words. But what of those who have renounced the world, yet still crave worldly pleasures? He asked. Vasudeva's eyes snapped back into focus, his voice taking on a note of urgency. "Such individuals bear mrityu within them, for they have not truly transcended their attachments. But you, my prince, must watch and observe your own nature, both within and without. Perceive the eternal reality that lies beyond the veil of appearances." As the night deepened, Vasudeva's words wove a tapestry of wisdom, guiding Yudhishthira through the labyrinthine paths of the soul. "Men do not approve of those consumed by worldly desires," he said. "All actions stem from desire. They are like lambs that sprout from the mind. Wise men subdue their desires, knowing that true virtue lies in their suppression." The sage's eyes seemed to hold a secret, one that only the initiated might comprehend. The yogi who has come on with the Supreme Spirit knows yoga as the path to salvation. He remembers that what the soul desires is not conducive to piety and virtue.
In the aftermath of the Great War, the kingdom was left to mourn the loss of its beloved heroes. Yudhishthira, the royal saint, had lost dear friends and family members in the battle, his heart heavy with grief. He sought solace from the wise sages who had gathered around him. Visarasrava, a sage of great ascetic merits, and Vesa, the revered seer, spoke words of comfort to the grieving king. They were joined by other esteemed individuals, including Krishna, Devasthana, Narada, Nekula, Krishna, Draupadi Sahadeva, and Vijaya. These wise men and women offered their condolences and shared their wisdom with Yudhishthira as he listened to their words of solace. The king's sorrow began to lift. He felt a sense of relief wash over him as he realized that he was not alone in his grief. The sage's presence and counsel brought peace to his troubled mind with a newfound sense of calm. Yudhishthira decided to perform the obsequial ceremonies for his departed friends with the help of the wise men. The king honored the Brahmanas and Devas, performing the rituals with great devotion as he completed these sacred duties. Yudhishthira's kingdom began to flourish once more. His subjects rejoiced as their beloved leader regained control over the realm, which stretched from the farthest reaches of the earth to its girdle of oceans, with his kingdom secure and his mind at peace. Yudhishthira turned to Vesa and Narada, seeking guidance on his next step. He told them that he had been comforted by their words and now felt no cause for sorrow. He also expressed his desire to perform a grand sacrifice in honor of the gods. Vesa, ever wise and compassionate, listened attentively to Yudhishthira's words. He knew that the king was still struggling with the weight of his grief, but he also recognized the importance of moving forward with Narada and other sages present. Vesa offered his counsel. Let us journey together to the Himalayan regions, where we shall perform your sacrifice under the protection of the gods. The proposal was met with enthusiasm by Yudhishthira and his companions. They knew that this great undertaking would not only bring them closer to the divine, but also provide a fitting tribute to their fallen heroes. As they prepared for their journey, the sages vanished into thin air, leaving behind the sense of wonder. And Noah Pandava, still reeling from the loss of Bhishma and other dear friends, were now tasked with performing the funeral ceremonies for these noble souls. They gave generously to the Brahmanas, distributing vast wealth in honor of their fallen comrades as they worked tirelessly to complete these sacred duties. Time seemed to pass slowly. The sun was setting over the tranquil landscape of Indraprastha, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly hall. The great warrior Vasudeva and his dear friend Dhananjaya, also known as Arjuna, had been celebrating their victory alongside their brothers, the Pandavas. Their joy was palpable, like that of the celestial gods Indra and his consort in the heavenly realms. As they sat together surrounded by picturesque woodlands, sceneries, and majestic mountain ranges, Vasudeva began to speak with great enthusiasm. Arjuna, my friend, he said, the whole earth has been conquered by our noble king, Yudhishthira. Relying on your mighty arms, the virtuous prince now enjoys the sovereignty of the earth without a rival, thanks to your unwavering support. And the bravery of Bhima and the twin brothers. Vasudeva's words were filled with emotion as he recounted the tale of their triumphs. It was by righteousness alone that our king regained his kingdom free from all enemies. He continued, and it was through righteous action that King Sayadhana met his Devas in battle along with his wicked sons and followers. As Vasudeva spoke, Krishna, also known as Janardana, listened intently, his eyes filled with compassion. He knew the weight of Arjuna's grief over the loss of his loved ones, and the burden of responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. Krishna rose from his seat and approached Arjuna, his voice gentle and soothing. My dear son, he said, I have come to comfort you. In your time of sorrow, the earth has been pacified, and our king reigns supreme. Your duty is done, and now it is time for me to return to Dwaravash. Arjuna's face was etched with sadness as he listened to Vasudeva's words. He knew that his friend was right. The kingdom was at peace, and their brothers were safe. Yet a part of him still lingered in grief. Krishna's voice cut through Arjuna's thoughts like a gentle breeze on a summer day. My dear son, he repeated, I must return to Dwaravash. I have stayed here for as long as the necessity required. Now it is time for me to rejoin my people. Arjuna looked up at Krishna, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions. He knew that his friend was right. The kingdom was at peace, and their brothers were safe. With a heavy heart, he nodded in agreement. Be it so, he said, softly, his voice barely above a whisper. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the assembly hall in a warm golden light, Vasudeva rose from his seat, his eyes shining with a deep affection for Arjuna. than my dear friend. In the serene assembly rooms of Dwaraka, Janimjaya sat in rapt attention as Vesampayana began to rack out a tale that would change his understanding forever. The king asked about the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna after their victorious return from battle. Vesampayana's words transported us to a tranquil part of the palace, where Krishna and Arjuna strolled together surrounded by their attendants. Arjuna's eyes sparkled with joy as he gazed upon the magnificent mansion, his heart filled with delight in the company of his dear friend Krishna. They walked. Arjuna turned to Krishna and expressed his longing for the conversations they had shared during the battle. He confessed that his mind had grown fickle and he had forgotten the profound truths Krishna had imparted to him. Krishna, with a gentle smile, replied that it was not his words that were forgotten, but rather Arjuna's own understanding. Krishna began to speak in a voice filled with compassion and wisdom. I shall now recount an ancient tale, he said, about the path to moksha, the ultimate liberation from the cycle of birth and death. As Vesampayana continued his narrative, we found ourselves transported to a distant land where a Brahmana named Kasyapa sought out a sage who embodied the highest ideals. The sage, a master of yoga and scriptural knowledge, possessed extraordinary attributes that left Kasyapa in awe. The sage welcomed Kasyapa as a disciple and shared with him the secrets of the universe. With humility and reverence, Kasyapa listened to the sage's words, which revealed the impermanence of all things and the futility of seeking happiness in this world. The sage spoke of his own journey, how he had undergone countless births and deaths, experiencing diverse kinds of joy and suffering. He described his struggles with lust, wrath, and cupidity, and how he had eventually taken refuge in the formless, transcending the pairs of opposites that govern our existence. See, as the sage spoke, Kasyapa's heart was filled with wonder and devotion. The sage revealed to him the path to liberation, a path that led to absorption into eternal Brahman. With tranquility of soul, he had attained this success, and now, as he gazed upon the universe, he knew that he would not have to return to this world again. Krishna's words came alive in Vesampayana's narrative, echoing through the assembly rooms of Dwaraka like a gentle breeze on a summer day. As Janimjaya listened with rapt attention, his understanding expanded, and he began to see the universe in a new light. The tale of Kasyapa and the sage became a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting our own struggles and aspirations, reminding us that true liberation lies beyond the reach of human endeavor, in the realm of the eternal and the infinite.
In a serene and tranquil setting, Vasudeva approached a revered sage of Brahmana and touched his feet in reverence. The sage, known for his extraordinary wisdom, was asked by Vasudeva to answer some of the most profound and complex questions that had puzzled many for centuries. The questions revolved around the mysteries of life and death, and how the soul, or jiva, transmigrates from one body to another. Kasyapa, a sage who had been driven by curiosity and the desire or knowledge, posed these intricate queries to the Brahmana. The Brahmana, with his vast understanding and experience, agreed to enlighten Vasudeva on these matters. The sage began by explaining that when an individual's life force is spent and their body is no longer capable of sustaining them, they start to engage in self-destructive behaviors. They may eat irregularly or consume food that is detrimental to their well-being, leading to a decline in their physical and mental health. As the body weakens, the person becomes increasingly reckless, often resorting to extreme measures such as hanging. The Brahmana then described how the heat within the body becomes excruciating, causing all vital functions to cease. The wind, which is essential for life, becomes violent and pierces every part of the body, leading to immense pain. As the jiva feels its mortal casing disintegrate, it slips away, leaving behind the lifeless shell. This process is repeated throughout an individual's existence, with each birth and death marked by immense suffering. The Brahmana liken this experience to being in the womb or exciting it, both of which are extremely distressing. As the wind within the body becomes excited due to cold, it dissolves the union of matter, releasing the jiva from its physical prison. The sage then explained that when a person dies, their consciousness is extinguished, and they become destitute of heat, breath, beauty, and awareness. Their connection with Brahman, or the divine, is severed, leaving them lifeless. However, it is not just the individual who perishes. Their accumulated deeds also accompany them. The Brahmana continued by describing how the jiva creates life breathes within the body through the elements gathered together in certain parts. When these vital parts are pierced, the jiva rises up and enters the heart of the living creature, restraining the principle of animation without delay. The individual then becomes disconnected from their surroundings and loses all knowledge. Is the wind agitates the jiva. It takes a long and painful breath, causing the inanimate body to tremble. Once dissociated from its physical casing, the jiva is surrounded by its accumulated deeds, both good and bad. It is equipped with auspicious acts of merit and sins, which determine whether it will ascend to higher realms or descend to lower. One as the Brahmana concluded his explanation by describing the three regions assigned to the jiva eternally. In a serene and ancient land, the revered sage known as a Brahmana sat in contemplation, sharing profound wisdom with his disciple. The Brahmana began by explaining the eternal cycle of life and death, where every action, good or bad, is not destroyed, but yields its corresponding fruit. Just like a fruit-bearing tree produces a bountiful harvest when the season arrives, so too does merit, born from a pure heart, bring forth a rich crop of felicitious. The Brahmana spoke. He described how the jiva, the eternal soul, navigates through various bodies, carrying with it the accumulated actions of past lives. The vital seed infused with blood enters the womb and becomes the fertile ground for the jiva's manifestation. This subtle entity, though unattached to any physical form, is the source of all living creatures. The Brahmana continued, just as liquefied iron takes the shape of its mold when poured into it, so too does the jiva assume a new body, taking on the attributes and characteristics of the previous life. As fire heats a mass of iron, the manifestation of the jiva in the fetus is a similar process. As the sage spoke, his words wove a tapestry of understanding, revealing how every action, whether virtuous or wicked, bears fruit. Accordingly, the Brahmana explained that it is through the accumulation and exhaustion of past actions that the jiva eventually acquires knowledge of its duties and strives towards liberation. The wise man then revealed the path to righteousness, emphasizing the importance of gifts, self-restraint, compassion, purity, and reverence for one's elders and deities. He spoke of the conduct of the good, which is eternal and guides individuals towards a life of virtue. The Brahmana also highlighted the role of the yogin who has transcended worldly attachments and achieved liberation. As the sage concluded his discourse, he reflected on the mystery of the jiva's first acceptance of a body. According to ancient lore, Prajapati, the creator of the universe, ordained the cycle of birth and death, establishing a limit for each individual's time in this world. The Brahmana emphasized that understanding pratana, the material cause of all embodied creatures, is essential for crossing the ocean of worldly migration. Finally, with compassion and wisdom, the sage imparted his final instruction. Seat the supreme seat, O best of men, where consciousness dwells within all beings. Be indifferent to all else, and behold the world with an equal eye. And so, with these words, the Brahmana's teaching came full circle, illuminating the path towards liberation for his devoted disciple.
In the heart of ancient wisdom, a revered Brahmana shared the secrets of liberation with his eager student Arjuna. The sage began by explaining that true freedom lies in transcending the boundaries of individual identity and embracing the oneness of existence. He who becomes absorbed in the one receptacle of all things, freeing himself from even the thought of his own identity with all things, indeed ceasing to think of even his own existence. The Brahmana said as he spoke, a sense of calm descended upon Arjuna's mind. The sage continued, gradually casting off one after another will succeed in crossing his bonds. He described the ideal aspirant as one who is the friend of all, endures all, and is attached to tranquility. This noble soul has conquered all his senses, is divested of fear and wrath, and possesses a restrained soul. The Brahmana then revealed the stages of liberation, where the seeker gradually lets go of attachments, desires, and egoism. He who behaves towards all creatures as towards himself, who is restrained, pure, free from vanity, and divested of egoism, is regarded as emancipated from everything. The sage explained that one must look upon life and death, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, agreeable and disagreeable, with an equal gaze. Arjuna listened intently. The Brahmana described the ultimate goal to behold the supreme soul within oneself. He becomes emancipated who acquires neither merit nor demerit, who casts off the merits and demerits accumulated in previous births. He said, the sage emphasized that one must attain a state of complete concentration where the mind is fixed on the soul to illustrate this profound concept. The Brahmana used an analogy as a person beholding some unseen individual in a dream recognizes him, saying, this is he. When he sees him after waking, he compared the soul to the fibrous pith extracted from a blade of sakharam, manja, and the body to the plant itself, the Brahmana. Then shared the secrets of yoga, where one withdraws the senses from their objects and fixes the mind upon the soul. Having previously undergone the severest austerities, one should practice that concentration of mind which leads to emancipation. He said, through this practice the seeker attains a state of complete concentration where the supreme soul is beheld within oneself. As Arjuna listened with rapt attention, the Brahmana revealed the ultimate reward. When the bearer of a body adequately beholds the soul in yoga, he then has no one that is master over him, for he then becomes the lord of the three worlds. The sage concluded by emphasizing the importance of devotion to yoga and the attainment of liberation. Arjuna's curiosity was piqued, and he asked his teacher to explain various aspects of the human body.
In a small village nestled between two great rivers, a devoted wife named Garga approached her husband, a wise Brahmana named Vasudeva, who sat in contemplative silence, her eyes filled with concern. She asked him, where shall I go? Relying on you as my protector, you have abandoned all worldly duties and seem so distant from me. What will be my destiny if I am tied to one such as you? Vasudeva's tranquil countenance revealed no offense at her words. Instead, a gentle smile spread across his face as he began to explain the mysteries of the universe. My dear Garga, he said, that all actions are but temporary and dependent on external aids. Even the wise can only perform acts with the assistance of others. Freedom from action is an impossible dream in this world, for every being is bound by their thoughts, words, and deeds. As he spoke, his eyes seemed to gaze beyond the confines of their small home into a realm that lay beyond the reach of mortal senses. In the heart of every living thing, he continued, lies the seat of the soul. Untouched by the external world, there resides Brahma, transcendent and beyond all duality, accompanied by Sama and Agni as well as Vayu, the ever-present force that stirs the understanding. Gargai listened intently, her curiosity piqued by her husband's words. That seat, Vasudeva explained, is the ultimate goal of all seekers, including the great Brahman himself and those who have dedicated their lives to yoga. It is not something that can be perceived through our senses, nor touched or tasted. It is only accessible through the mind. As he spoke, a vision seemed to unfold before them. The cosmos itself, with its intricate web of life breaths, prana, apana, samana, vyana, and udana. These vital forces flowed from the heart of existence, nourishing all living things, even as they moved within each individual being. In this way, Vasudeva said, all creation arises from that central fire where the universe is born anew. In every moment, the Brahmana's words painted a vivid picture, one that seemed to awaken Garga's mind and heart. She saw the interconnectedness of all things, the eternal dance of life and death, and the mysterious forces that govern their world. As she listened, her understanding deepened, and with it her love for her husband and the mysteries he revealed. In this way, Vasudeva's teachings illuminated the path to enlightenment, guiding Garga toward a profound appreciation for the intricate web of existence. And as they sat together in contemplative silence, their hearts beat as one, united by the shared understanding that all beings are connected, and that the ultimate truth lies beyond the reach of mortal comprehension.
In a serene setting, a Brahmana sat with his wife, engaged in a profound discussion about the mysteries of existence. The Brahmana began to share an ancient story explaining that the universe was governed by 10 sacred fires, each representing a different aspect of human experience. These fires were fueled by the mind, which served as the ladle pouring libations of knowledge and understanding into the flames. The Brahmana's wife listened intently, her curiosity piqued by the tale. She asked why the word or Veda arose before the mind, and how it was possible for the prana life force to function independently in dreamless slumber. The Brahmana pondered these questions, his eyes closed, as he sought guidance from the ancient wisdom. As he opened his eyes, a gentle smile spread across his face. He began to wreak out a dialogue between word and mind, who had once approached the soul of matters, seeking clarification on their relative importance. The soul declared that the mind was superior, for it was capable of perceiving the world without attachment. Word yielded to this understanding, acknowledging its own inferiority. The Brahmana's wife listened with rapt attention as he continued his tale. He spoke of two minds, one immovable and connected to the divine, the other moldable and bound to the external world. The Brahmana claimed that the moldable mind was superior, for it could manifest in various forms, as mantra, letter, or voice cease. The discussion unfolded. The Brahmana's wife asked about the goddess word, who dwelled between prana and apana, the life force and the vital breath. She had once separated from prana, fleeing to Prajapati, but was eventually restored by the life force. The Brahmana explained that word flowed in two forms, one with irons, the other without. The latter was superior, for it yielded diverse meanings, and spoke of the eternal emancipation. The Brahmana's wife pressed on, seeking more insight into the mysteries of existence. She asked what the goddess word had said, when, though impelled to speak, she could not bring forth any words. The Brahmana smiled knowingly, his eyes glaring with ancient wisdom. In a hushed tone, he recounted how word was generated in the body by prana, then transformed into udana, and issuing out of the body, enveloping all quarters. As he spoke, the air seemed to thicken with an otherworldly energy, as if the very fabric of reality was being revealed. The Brahmana's wife listened in awe, her mind expanded by the secrets shared with her in this sacred space. The boundaries between the self and a universe dissolved, revealing a profound interconnectedness that transcended words and concepts. As the discussion came to a close, the couple sat in silence, their hearts filled with the mystery of existence. In a tranquil saying, a Brahmana sat amidst his wife, sharing an ancient tale of the 7 sacrificing priests. The nose, eye, tongue, skin, ear, mind, and understanding these priests, dwelling in subtle space, remained unaware of one another's presence. A Brahmana's wife, intrigued by this concept, asked how it was possible for these priests to coexist without perceiving each other. The Brahmana explained that ignorance is the lack of knowledge about an object's qualities, while knowledge is the understanding of those same qualities. He revealed that each priest failed to comprehend the attributes of the others. The nose alone could perceive smells, the eye alone could see colors, and the skin alone could feel sensations of touch. The ear alone could hear sounds, the mind alone could understand doubt, and the understanding alone could grasp determination and knowledge. Yet, despite their limitations, each priest acknowledged that they relied on one another to function. As the Brahmana's words hung in the air, the mind itself spoke up, asserting its dominance over all the other priests. Without me, it declared, the nose cannot smell, the tongue cannot taste, and the eye cannot see. The mind claimed to be the eternal and foremost element among them all, essential for their very existence. The senses, however, refuted the mind's boast. They argued that if they were truly unnecessary, then why did they continue to exist? Why did creatures rely on them to perceive the world around them? If the mind was so powerful, they challenged it to seize colors with its nose or taste with its eye. The senses claim that only those who are weak require rules and guidelines, not the powerful. The Brahmana's wife listened intently as the debate unfolded between the mind and the senses. She witnessed how the senses relied on one another to function, yet each remained unaware of the other's attributes. In this ancient narrative, she saw a reflection of the intricate relationships within herself and the world around her. The Brahmana concluded his tale by stating that without the senses, no perception or happiness could come to the mind, for they are inextricably linked. In a serene and tranquil setting, the Brahmana sat with his wife, engaged in a profound conversation about the mysteries of life. The Brahmana's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, carrying the listener away to a realm beyond the mundane. In this connection, he said, "O blessed lady," as cited the ancient story of what kind the institution is of the 5 sacrificing priests. His wife listened intently, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. That naturally there are 7 sacrificing priests is what was my former conviction, she said. The Brahmana smiled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Let the great principle be declared to me as to how verily
The number is 5 of the sacrificing priests. As they spoke, a supple shift occurred in their conversation. The wind began to whisper secrets in their ears, carrying the whispers of ancient wisdom on its gentle breath. The wind, nursed by prana, afterwards takes birth in apana. The brahmana continued. The wind, nursed in apana, then becomes developed into vyana, nursed by vyana. The wind is then developed into udana, nursed in udana. The wind is then generated as samana, a flash of insight. The Brahmana's wife grasped the deeper meaning behind these words. Those good beings in days of yore asked the firstborn, "Grandsire," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Brahmana nodded, his eyes closed in reverence, saying to the say, "Who amongst us is the foremost? He whom thou wilt indicate will be our chief." The wind continued to whisper its secrets, carrying the voices of ancient sages on its breath. Ye upon whose extinction all the life breathes become extinct in the bodies of living creatures, the Brahmana said, his voice like a gentle stream flowing through the landscape. He upon whose moving they move is verily the foremost among you. Do ye go wary? Ye, like prana, the wind born from the breath of creation, spoke up, "First upon my extinction all the life breathes become extinct in the bodies of living creatures." It said, "Upon my moving they once more move. I am therefore the foremost." With a gentle sigh, prana went into extinction, only to rise again like the morning sun. But samana and udana, disputed pranas, claimed their voices, rising in a soft crescendo. "Thou dost not dwell here, pervading all this as we do," they said. "Thou art not the foremost amongst us, O prana." And so the debate continued, each wind arguing its own supremacy. Apana spoke up next, its voice like a gentle brook babbling over smooth stones. "When I become extinct, all the life winds become extinct in the bodies of living creatures." It said, when in a serene forest glade 2 wise men sat in contemplative silence. The venerable Rishi Devamata, with eyes closed and hands clasped together, awaited the arrival of Narada, a sage renowned for his profound understanding of the mysteries of existence seas. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. Narada arrived, his presence announced by the gentle rustle of leaves beneath his feet. With a courteous bow he sat beside Devamata and began their conversation. Amsa said, "Devamata, what is it that first awakens in a being at the moment of birth? Is it prana, apana, samana, vyana, or udana?" His words hung in the air like a question mark, inviting Narada to share his wisdom. Narada's eyes sparkled with insight as he replied, "The first thing that arises is other than the being itself. The life winds are paired, working together in harmony. Those that move transversely upwards and downwards." His voice was like a gentle stream flowing effortlessly to convey the subtleties of his knowledge. Devamata's curiosity was piqued, and he pressed Narada for further explanation, by which life wind is a creature produced who comes first among them. His words were laced with an eagerness to understand the mysteries that lay beyond the veil of the mundane world. Narada's expression turned thoughtful as he began to weave his tale. From sankalpa, or desire, arises pleasure. It also emerges from sound, taste, and color. The semen, when united with blood, first awakens prana. As the semen is modified by prana, apana flows forth. Pleasure arises from the union of male and female energies, as well as from taste. His words painted a vivid picture of the intricate dance between opposing forces. As Narada spoke, his words became like a river flowing into a tranquil lake. This is the form of udana, the upward moving life wind. Pleasure is born from union, just as semen and blood come together to generate new life. Desire gives rise to the menstrual flow, while samana and vyana, the pair that moves transversely, work in harmony to create a balance between opposing forces. Devamata listened intently, his eyes shining with a deep understanding of the mysteries being revealed to him. Narada continued, "Even as Agni or fire is the embodiment of all the deities, so too is it the teaching of the Veda that the life winds are interconnected and interdependent. As the sun began its descent towards the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the forest glade, Devamata turned to Narada with a sense of reverence. "Your words have illuminated the mysteries for me," he said.
In a serene An ancient setting of Brahmana sat with a devoted lady eager to share with her the profound mysteries of the Chaitrotra. Sacrifice, the air was filled with the sweet scent of incense as he began his tale. Chaitrotra, he said, is an institution rooted in timelessness. It is a cosmic dance where four sacred priests, the aged instrument action and emancipation, weave together to envelop the universe. These priests are not just mere mortals. They represent the very fabric of existence. As he spoke, his eyes sparkled with reverence as he described the seven senses, the nose, tongue, eye, skin, ear, mind, and understanding. These senses, he explained, are born from the knowledge of qualities. Smell, taste, color, sound, touch, objects of the mind and objects of the understanding. They are the offspring of action, and their purpose is to experience the world around them. The Brahmana's words wove a tapestry of wonder as he described how these senses interact with their respective qualities.